Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Margareta Dovgal. I'm the Managing Director of Resource Works Society based in Vancouver, and we're focused on responsible natural resource development as a foundation for economic prosperity, Indigenous partnerships, and practical pathways needed to meet Canada's climate and energy goals in tandem. I also work closely with the Energy Futures Institute, where former BC Environment Minister and Attorney General Barry Penner leads our work on pragmatic, evidence-based energy policy, particularly around electrification. Our consistent message is that Canada and British Columbia succeed when policy is grounded in reliability, affordability, and the full range of our energy strengths, including our deep hydroelectric base and our abundant natural gas. The motion before you rightly calls for an in-depth look at electrification, energy self-sufficiency, and domestic energy security, while respecting provincial jurisdiction. We welcome the study and the May 2026 National Electricity Strategy, Powering Canada Strong, with its ambition to double Canada's electricity supply by 2050 by providing greater flexibility in the clean electricity regulations. British Columbia offers a clear illustration of why that flexibility matters in practice. Under the province's Look West Jobs and Prosperity Strategy and federal signals around ambitious LNG expansion, natural gas production in British Columbia is forecast to grow significantly. The province is on track to export 19.4 million tons of LNG per year by the end of this decade, with proposed projects bringing that number to a further 28.5 million tons. This growth supports LNG exports and condensate demand tied to Alberta's oil sands. Producing and processing gas takes power. Electricity demand from the upstream natural gas sector, which relates to the power needed to run the gas fields themselves, is said to rise faster than BC Hydro's 2025 Integrated Resource Plan anticipates. Industry analysis, including work shared by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, shows that trajectory pretty clearly. British Columbia is building the North Coast transmission line to bring more than 2,200 megawatts to the northwest. But transmission at that scale takes years to get to that point. In the meantime, these facilities need power that is abundant, reliable, and affordable. In many cases, the most practical answer is greater industry self-generation, paired with natural gas as firm, dispatchable power. Natural gas is already playing this role at scale. In 2025, gas and other combustible generation reached its highest level and its highest share of the Canadian grid in the current data series, rising for years as gas displaces coal and backstops a system stretched by drought-reduced hydro. Gas provides the reliability and peaking capability that intermittent sources and long transmission lines alone cannot guarantee, especially as we electrify buildings, transport, and industry while adding data centers and resource projects. The National Electricity Strategy correctly recognizes that natural gas can play a strategic role in a diverse portfolio. The proposed adjustments to the clean electricity regulations, chiefly greater use of credible offsets, flexibility to avoid stranded assets, and support for near-term reliability are positive steps. For them to deliver, they must be durable and certain enough that developers and operators will actually invest behind them. Provincial jurisdiction is central here. BC has its own integrated resource plan, the Clean BC framework, and building electrification roadmap. A national strategy should coordinate on interprovincial transmission and regulatory efficiency while respecting the ability of provinces to plan their own mixes. Top-down prescription risks higher costs and slower progress, enabling provincial leadership, including the practical use of natural gas, where it strengthens reliability, produces better outcomes. Resource development is itself part of the solution. LNG and upstream natural gas drive jobs, growth, and government revenues that in turn help fund the very infrastructure this study contemplates. In British Columbia, they increasingly do so with First Nations as owners, not just hosts. Cedar LNG, a Haisla Nation majority-owned project, and the Nisga'a Partners Silisms development, which signed a European supply agreement last month, show what Indigenous-led energy looks like in practice. And where we can add value at home, we should. Generating power here keeps the jobs, the reliability, and the emissions advantage in Canada. Canadian LNG, with one of the lowest emissions intensities in the world, gives our allies a lower carbon option than the fuels it competes against abroad. If I can leave the committee with one thing, it is this. Plan realistically for resource-driven electricity demand in British Columbia. Let industry self-generate and use gas as firm power alongside hydro. Make the clean electricity regulation flexible, real, and durable. Respect provincial jurisdiction while coordinating on transmission and approvals, and recognize the provincial responsible development of our natural resources pays for a cleaner grid. Canada has the resources, the technology, and the people to meet rising demand while holding the line on reliability and affordability. British Columbia's combination of deep hydro and abundant natural gas, increasingly developed with First Nations, is exactly the pairing a national strategy should enable rather than constrain. Thank you. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dovgal. Thank you to all our witnesses for your presentations, all on point and on time. We're now going to move to MP colleagues around the table, and we're going to start with Mrs. Stubbs for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here today and for your testimony. I'll start with you, Ms. how do I say this? Dovgal? Dovgal. And Mr. Larocque. Both of you, in turn, Ms. Dovgal, you highlighted that the Liberal Fuel Standard forces Canada to import biofuels from the U.S., as you did too in the Canadian Fuels Association. So, first of all, Ms. Dovgal, is it fair to say that the Liberal Fuel Standard is a hidden tax that currently adds 7 cents per litre and will add 13 cents per litre for gas and 16 cents per litre for diesel by 2030?
I think it's adequate and fair to say that a variety of policies, including the Clean Fuel Standard, are hidden costs on not just production of resources, but also on Canadian consumers and affordability. We see it in a variety of ways, but we have to look at it as a package. This government has said they want Canada to be an energy superpower. We're still falling quite short of that. We've seen some improvements, notably out of the Alberta MOU, but that relates to Alberta producers. Those are changes on competitiveness, including things like the output-based pricing system that we actually need to see elsewhere across the country for us to be able to get to that threshold of being an energy superpower and attracting the capital required to get there.
And I'm going to go to the Fuels Association in a second, but since you mentioned that, the carve-out and the Alberta MOU, I would just say, it seems to me, and I wonder what you think about this, after the years that this government has been told by proponents, by utility companies who are concerned about providing affordable, reliable power to their ratepayers, this government's been told over and over for years that the clean electricity regulations are divisive, punitive, unrealistic, and would drive up costs for consumers, and that their target is unrealistic on the timeline that they've set it. So to me, given that they've given that workaround in the negotiations between the government of Alberta and the government of Canada, they're recognizing the anti-competitive impact of that policy. Wouldn't it make more sense than to scrap it for all the provinces?
I think you're exactly correct on that. So we see it across the board. Many policies that we've seen in the last year and a half are essentially a recognition that the way things are set up right now are broken. They're not actually designed to export energy and to produce it competitively. They're designed to keep the product in the ground. And the Alberta MOU provisions on electricity, that's a great example. We also see that in major projects approvals. The fast-tracking legislation, while that is highly optimistic and promising for many proponents and certainly a good opportunity to create jobs and opportunities for tax revenues, it is also a recognition that the approvals process is broken. It is not achieving the results that it needs to, whether that relates to that or other areas of energy and climate policy. We need to be thinking about an overhaul that is actually intended to deliver the types of results that this government says it cares about.
Yes, thank you, and especially with regard to being able to compete and beat the United States and OPEC competitors right around the world. And Ms. Dovgal, maybe you'd like to answer.
Yeah, for sure. Canada needs to diversify our trade. We need to get our product to market. We need to ensure that the capital actually flows in a way that is accomplished through competitiveness. And I have three broader recommendations to your earlier question. The first one is to conduct a comprehensive review to ascertain whether our broader legislative and regulatory system around energy and climate is actually aligned with the objective of fully leveraging our natural resource assets for the benefit of Canadians. To the points you've raised, certainly in impact assessment, certainly in carbon pricing, and all sorts of regulations, including the ones currently being studied here. There's tremendous room for improvement at the very least. Secondly, I would recommend something rather philosophical. Assess honestly where subsidies are necessary or where they're actually being used to bridge policy failures rather than market failures. We often hear this idea that it is market failure that is responsible for why things are so expensive, why it is hard to build large infrastructure, whether that's domestic electricity generation and transmission or something else. There's plenty of evidence from many fields across the broader energy ecosystem that we are getting in our own way pretty habitually. And then finally, I'd say more practical solution in relation to the study is self-generation. Industry has the ability to do that. Our electricity grid, particularly in British Columbia, is strained. We're relying on imports from jurisdictions like the United States increasingly, and we need to, as we grow our production of very valuable valuable, very necessary for our economy products like liquefied natural gas. We need to allow industry to actually generate its own electricity because they are producing the product that they are shipping abroad. It makes no sense to force them to rely on the electrical system for that.
You've got 30 seconds, Mr. Rowe. So.
Go.
Oh, yeah. So I got a question for Ms. Dovgal. Beta Nord in Newfoundland and Labrador was approved in the condition that it was achieve net zero operations by 2050. Is that even possible? How does an offshore oil rig achieve net zero by 2050? Are they going to have solar panels out there on the rig, or how does that happen?
I'm not familiar with that
please.
specific project, but I will say that I know of it, but not in detail. Generally speaking, requirements for net zero are achievable at great cost and great expense, and that's a direct hit to the competitiveness of our industry. So if your goal is to actually get projects built, to produce products that pay into our tax coffers, that put Canadians to work, you need to seriously think hard about the imposition of net zero requirements.
Thank you both.
I just want to clarify with everyone that whenever there was a change on taxation regarding fuel, it was immediately seen at the pump. So when we had the carbon tax removed about a year ago, we saw it immediately. The excise tax was the same thing. It came into effect on Monday morning, and we saw it. The problem we're facing is crude. The price of crude globally is the biggest impact we're seeing on gas prices. So it went from about $90 a barrel, 95, and then there was escalation in the Middle East, and it was $110 within 3 days, and that pretty much eliminated the 10 cents a liter on the excise tax. So now, hopefully this de-escalates. Now the barrel is down to about $80, $85. So that is the biggest impact, is the price of crude on commodity that's having on price of gas.
Do you have any comments, Ms. Dovgal, on
I
removing
can
taxes?
just briefly comment overall that any taxation that we do, whether it's direct to consumers or hidden taxes that have to do with the cost of producing the products that we use, we see the impact on affordability. The more removed you get from it in terms of the broader supply chain, the harder it is for people to understand where it's coming from. But when we're talking about affordability, we should also talk about the way that people can afford their lives, which is incomes, which is productivity, and in order to get to that, we need to have higher competitiveness for global capital so we can build more big things and employ Canadians. And that's another very valuable way of offsetting, not just looking at specific taxes that consumers get exposed to.
Good point about all the economic contributions that can also be gained from cutting expensive taxes that don't actually achieve the aims its proponents argue. So I wonder, both to the Fuel Association and Ms. Dovgal, you know, the Liberals promised more than a year ago that they would bring in legislative and regulatory reform. They advocated that they would do these cut permitting timelines to 2 years and under. We're actually moving into their second year, and they haven't yet brought forward that repeal and reform agenda, even though they've listed all these laws and regulations in the back of C5 that they know block building, which is why they put it in there. And Conservatives, of course, have consistently called for these regulatory and legislative changes to be made at every single step. I can say that as a person who's been here for 11 years, and that Conservatives have always argued to make Canada's regulatory system competitive, attractive, predictable, fair, objective, evidence and science-based. And we have also, since I've been elected, supported the construction of 2 pipelines that would have provided Canadian energy self-reliance, security, and exports both to Asia and to Europe. What does it say when everyone from industry to legal experts to the Supreme Court of Canada to opposition members to every premier and territorial leader who have called for overhauls, that this government is actually going into its second year of power and just announced that it's going to delay consultations on the very changes that proponents right across natural resources sector are saying need to happen?
Take this one first. Sure. You know, for the majority of the 11 years that you've been here, and since Liberals were elected in 2015, we had policies on the books whose implicit purpose, even if it wasn't the stated purpose, was to keep the product in the ground. And that was something, I was a Liberal for many years. I organized for the Young Liberals. That is something members of Parliament told me was a priority. It was ensuring that, you know, we're shutting down the dirty tar sands. That was a line I heard from elected officials on the other side.
It's so anti-scientific because there's no tar there.
What was that, sorry?
So anti-scientific because there's no tar.
Well, precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, big you know, quote marks around that. But
Yeah.
that was a policy
The oil.
framework that had the intent of making it profoundly difficult for this industry to grow. And now the light has seemingly been seen. We've come under unprecedented economic pressures. It is hard to roll all of that back. And I think the pressure is on to get to results that aren't just Band-Aids, because we are seeing Band-Aids. There is something promising. There's a lot of promising indicators and signs, but we need to ensure that it's not just large corporations only who have regulatory capacity, who have the ability to navigate lots of regulation and hired large teams that can successfully navigate this. We actually need to ensure the energy sector is one that all Canadians can benefit from, and I think that comes down to the core principles of these policies. So if we want to see that change to make Canada an energy superpower, we need to think more in terms of structural reform to get away from policies of the past.
Thank you both.